Hey everybody, this is a revised version of several videos on the Synagogue of Satan, and it's just going to be an expanded version with some more information, more details, and also I'm going to try to bring out some of the faint traces you might be able to see in history about it, and so it'll be in several parts. I'll just read the passages that refer to the Synagogue of Satan, just to make sure if anybody doesn't believe it's in the Bible. I know your works and tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Okay, so here we have a class of people that are being accused of concealing who they really are, and they're claiming to be Jews, and we've got to wonder why would they be lying about that and who they really are. We know that the Jews follow a certain religion, and this has a form of worship and also a priesthood, so we've got to ask, who is it that's acting in the guise of a priesthood and a religion that are not what they say they are? It's a counterfeit. This priesthood first appeared in Mesopotamia, which is now Iraq, and Cain also built his cities, the cities of his people, in the same area. It's believed to be in the same area. And, for example, the city of Erech, mentioned in the Bible, it was called Unuk by the Sumerians, which is the name Enoch, which is mentioned as Cain's city, named after his son. Another city was Irad, which was known as Eridu. That's the name for Enoch's son. And other cities like Akkad, Babel, and Nineveh are mentioned, as well as others. And these all seem to be part of what seems to be a wicked empire that formed. And some believe that Mesopotamia was the land of Nod, and I think it might have actually given the name to India. The same consonants are in those names, N and D. And the Persian Gulf might have been more land at that time, and the sea covered what was once land that went down south and east towards India. Not to say that the whole continent of India, subcontinent, was the land of Nod, but maybe parts of it. So Babel seems to take center stage in this empire, and the Bible doesn't directly mention the Tower of Babel. It mentions a tower and a city, and in Hebrew that name Babel means confusion, and that's from the confusing of the languages in that city. Babel is the first city mentioned in Nimrod's kingdom, and the name means Gate of the Gods, or that's its most known name. It had other names. In Sumerian, it was known as Kadingara, and in Egyptian it was Babar, which is the same word just pronounced in the Egyptian language, and Babirus in Old Persian. It also had some more obscure names, Tintir, Eki, Seski. The name Seski may be connected to the name Shishak or Shishak in the Bible, and that has the meaning of different meanings for it, or seed of life, life of trees, place of canals, and it was traditionally founded by Nimrod, but more than that, it was traditionally founded by the god Marduk. And this is important because this is the first big connection to the Synagogue of Satan and the priesthood connected to it. Marduk was the chief god of Babylon and the temple there in Babylon. And Marduk was typically depicted as a dragon, and that's pretty important right there. And notice that Nimrod's name could contain the name Marduk, so it may be that Nimrod was Marduk, a deified god. He was a man, clearly in the Bible, but possibly deified into the god Marduk. The name Marduk comes from a Semitic word, Mared, which means rebellion. And in the letters, the consonants of Mared, MRD, you can see those included in Nimrod, so there may be a connection there. And Babylon lived up to the name of its main god, Marduk, because it was a very rebellious city, and there were several upheavals in history involved with Babylon, and I believe it had to do with the worship of Marduk. It seems that every time the worship of Marduk was changed, there was some kind of revolt, and that was involved with the Synagogue of Satan, the priesthood of it. The whole region of Mesopotamia seems to have first been ruled by Cain's people, and then later by other people or mixtures of people, and that would be like the Amorites, the Kassites, Hittites, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and so on. And by the way, the region had many names like Sumer, Shinar. I said that it was probably the land of Nod, and it's also known as Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. It's Babylonia. It's also called Iraq today. The temple was destroyed several times, and I'll just give some brief overviews from history of what was happening, and there is some evidence in history of it. And the first is the destruction by Sargon in 2350 BC. And just by the way, the name Sargon could very well mean Prince Cain. Sar is prince and Gon is Cain. Now this Sargon may not be Cain himself, but Cain may have had that title. So it was first known to be destroyed then, and then it was restored by a king or prince named Sharkala-Shiri or Sharkala-Shari in about 100 years later. The tower itself in Babel was known by the Sumerians as Etemenanki. That means the building of the foundation platform of heaven and earth, whose top reaches to heaven. There were struggles with different kings, and they would place other puppet kings in the different cities in the region to control them, and Babylon was no different. And the kings of Babylon would often rebel and take power, and one of those was Marduk Baladan, and he even had the name of that god in that city. And Babylon just shows its rebelliousness through history. And then from Marduk Baladan and his people, the Chaldeans, came Nebuchadnezzar. The Assyrians were struggling with Babylon, and we know that Babylon, both the city and the temple, seem to have been destroyed because the city and temple were rebuilt by Esarhaddon, the king of Assyria, who was at about the same time as the Chaldean king of Babylon, Marduk Baladan. He had conspired with the king of Judah and Israel to fight against the king of Assyria, and you can see how rebellious Babylon was, and they were so rebellious that even Sargon II of Assyria had exiled a lot of the Babylonians to Samaria in Israel. There are existing records that show that Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt Babylon, and the Bible also indicates the same thing. And we can assume that Nebuchadnezzar had a falling out with the priests of Marduk. The Bible indicates that he repented, so it's pretty clear that he accepted Daniel's God, the God of Israel, and that he would have rejected the temple of Marduk and the priests of Marduk. And the priests of Marduk are known to have conspired with the Persians, and they would have the Persians come into Babylon if they would accept the worship of Marduk. They even allowed the Persians to come in. We even have an artifact in the ancient cuneiform writing. It's called the Cyrus cylinder, where it says clearly that King Cyrus the Persian worshipped Marduk. Marduk was his chief god. So this whole cycle of rebellion just seems to keep repeating itself, and it seems to be involved with the worship of Marduk. And remember, the name Marduk comes from the word for rebellion. And under the Persians there were even more revolts, so that ultimately the city of Babylon itself was destroyed. There were a couple of revolts. There was one under Nadintu Bel in 522 BC. There was one led by Araka in 521 BC, and one by Bel-Shemani and Shamash Ariba in 482 BC. I'm not sure who these people were, if they were priests or princes, but the city was ultimately destroyed. Apparently the city was destroyed, but not the temple. The city was destroyed in 478 BC, And then the temple of Marduk itself was destroyed in 472 BC. And this would fulfill several prophecies in the Bible that Babylon would never be inhabited again. And in fact, the area where the original temple and city of Babylon were is not inhabited, and it's still a desert. And it seems that the prophecy has been fulfilled, and it's going to stay fulfilled. So the next question is, where did the priests of Marduk go when their temple was destroyed? There are a lot of speculations on where they went, but we've seen this spirit of rebellion rising up again and again. So I would say one way to tell where they went is, where do you see rebellions? Where do you see revolt? There's always some upheaval, and they always seem to be at the heart of it. Now it's very interesting that right at this time, the exiles from Judah were returning to Israel and Jerusalem. So did the priests of Marduk go with them back to Israel? And there's another theory and some evidence that the priests of Marduk moved to northern Iraq to a place called Haran, which is mentioned in the Bible as the place where Abraham went when he had left Babylon and the region of Babylon. So I'll go over some of the theories about where the priests of Marduk went after the temple of Marduk was destroyed in Babylon, but I will leave that for the next part. So until the next time.